This is Gotham TV Podcast, episode 55, covering Gotham Season 2, episode 4, Strike Force.
Hey, this is Drew Powell. I play Butch Gilzine on Gotham, and you are listening to Gotham TV Podcast.
Welcome back, detectives. Welcome back, Gothamites. This is Gotham TV Podcast, and we are looking at Strike Force, the fourth episode of this season, the second season of Gotham. I am one of your hosts, John.
And I'm your other host, Derek. Welcome back.
Welcome back indeed. We are pleased to introduce another Gothamite G.C.P.D. detective, or should I say captain to the force tonight, and that is Captain Nathaniel Barnes, played by Michael Chiklis, which was really cool. I was thrilled.
Yeah, really good to see him again. 10 hut, John.
10 hut! Indeed. Like, this is one of the episodes that we caught in New York.
Yeah, the final episode that we got while we were on our trip to New York. So this will pretty much be our last podcast for 2016 on the episodes of Gotham, unfortunately. Bit of sad news to start us out tonight, but we definitely enjoyed it and definitely enjoyed the episodes that we got out of New York.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, Gotham over in Ireland and the UK is subject to a later start date, and it's not until 2016. It should be early 2016, but still there's no exact date yet announced by Channel 5, who's broadcasting it in the UK. There may also be the broadcast of Gotham on the Irish state channel, RTE, as well. But again, it's going to be delayed. And sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles with respects to the scheduling of North American TV over here. And in fact, in some cases, this is better than other shows that we just simply don't get on the terrestrial or satellite television in Europe, or at least in Ireland and the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Shows like iZombie have never been broadcast in Ireland. Constantine was only broadcast on Amazon, which is a channel only available in the UK. We've spoken about a lot of this before, but the one thing we want to say is we are delighted that we've been able to see the 4 episodes that we got to see while we were in New York. So worth the price of admission for New York Comic Con, really.
Yeah, and it's, a little taster for our listeners, but also we hope that we've been able to bring a different perspective from some of the other American podcasts who are podcasting about this, a different eyes on the TV show from other podcasts. We've been thrilled to see it, and we will obviously be back closer to the start of Gotham in Ireland and the UK.
Yeah, definitely. If you do want to find us, and make sure you subscribe to our podcast for Gotham, it's on gothamtvpodcast.com/iTunes. We'll bring you to the iTunes link, or you can get us on any good podcast catcher like Podcast Addict, Beyond Pod, tons of good podcast catchers out there. You'll find us in pretty much every one of them.
Yeah, and also, whilst we're away from Gotham, we will still be on our at Gotham TV Podcast Twitter handle. But I hear the questions being raised. Derek, what are we doing whilst we're away from Gotham TV Podcast?
Yeah, we have been covering the Marvel shows for Netflix over on our other podcast, Defenders TV Podcast. You can find that podcast over on defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes for the iTunes link. And again, just search Defenders TV Podcast in any good podcast catcher. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we have the release of Jessica Jones, the second Netflix Marvel series, which we were lucky enough to see the first episode of in New York Comic Con as well. An excellent TV show. Really enjoyed the first episode and really excited to cover that again. So that gets released on November 20th, and the first episode of our coverage of Jessica Jones will be released on that day over on defenderstvpodcast.com.
Yeah, so in the hiatus that is Gotham until it airs in Ireland, and of course, we will be covering all 13 episodes of Jessica Jones on Defenders TV Podcast. Again, you can search for us there at www.defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, or again, any other good podcast catcher. So we'll be looking at those in the Gotham hiatus that we have until it comes out in Europe, or at least in Ireland and the UK.
Yeah. So while you might miss us on Gotham, you'll definitely hear our voices over there. I think with that's enough of the prelude to this episode with the bad news that we're not going to be covering anything more than episode 4. Let's get into episode 4, John.
Yeah, the good news.
Yeah. So episode 4 is Strike Force, written by Danny Cannon, the lead showrunner for this season, and directed by TJ Scott, one of our favorite directors of Gotham season 1. He also directed episodes of Constantine last year in the first season. He's directed loads of Orphan Black, tons of TV shows, and is also a great photographer in his own right as well.
Yeah, there are some really amazing shots in this episode, really stylistic, really cool. Just as a hint, that may be one of my points.
Interesting. But to start us off, do you want to give us the synopsis for this episode, John?
Sure. Oswald Cobblepot has gathered together the new criminal heads of Gotham to find out who was responsible for the Arkham breakout, but he's unable to find the source. Tabitha Gallivan pays him a visit to bring him to a meeting with her brother, where Theo takes responsibility for the new level of violence in Gotham and enlists an initially reluctant Penguin in his plot to become the next mayor of Gotham. Penguin has been tasked with taking out the other mayoral candidates in exchange for the release of his mum, Mrs. Cappleput, who has been kidnapped by Tabitha. A thankful Bruce Wayne invites Theo Gallivan to dinner at Gotham's finest restaurant to praise Theo for saving his life. There Bruce meets the enchanting Silver St. Cloud, niece and ward of the Gallivan siblings, and discovers he will have a friend this year at Andrew's prep. Elsewhere in Gotham, another dinner is taking place as Ed Nigma finally asks Kristen Kringle out on a date to Chez Moi. As Jim Gordon continues his fight against corruption in the G.C.P.D, a chair-wielding ally arrives to take the fight to a new level. Enter new Captain Nathaniel Barnes. He works quickly to remove the most corrupt cops on the force and replace them with a new squad. This strike force is an elite unit of top-level cadets handpicked from the academy by Gordon and Barnes themselves. As the new unit goes into action, hunting the killer of Councillor Caulfield, Jim learns that Oswald is the likely suspect behind the murder and the attempted murders of the other mayoral candidates, Councillor Hobbs and Theo Gallivan himself. However, the first real mission that Captain Barnes has for the strike force sits uncomfortably with Jim as it seeks to take out public enemy number 1, the Penguin. Whew. Well, that was a long one. There was a lot going on in this episode, I think.
Yeah, I think we pretty much touched on most of the Gotham residents for this episode. There's tons going on, loads of bits and pieces to talk about, and loads of stuff that we've seen in this episode. A good setup episode for the season. A little bit of a slower episode overall, I think, and the first episode in the last 3 where nobody dies, which I think is quite important. No major character.
Absolutely, but there is that slap, which was quite controversial at the time, and I suppose still is on a fresh rewatching of it.
Certainly, we will be talking about that as we go through. Listeners, if this is your first time joining us, I know most of you have joined us throughout season 1 and season 2 of Gotham, but if it is your first time joining us, the way we cover our episodes is we talk about our 5 points of the episode, the pieces that stood out to us, and hopefully cover off the whole episode throughout those points and notes.
Yeah, and it will, of course, be spoiler-filled. So if you haven't watched the episode, if you don't want to know anything that goes on in Gotham, episode 4, then obviously, please avert your gaze now.
You're in the wrong place. If you've gotten through that synopsis without being spoiled, you may be in the wrong place. Yeah, definitely.
So, Derek, what is your first spoiler-filled case point for tonight?
My first case point is actually just right at the start. It's not a huge spoiler, but yeah, it's Oswald and the new status quo on the mob side of Gotham. Really interesting. It's kind of the first time we've seen Oswald surrounded as King of Gotham by all of the new heads of the crime families. Where we left them last season really was with Maroni's gang on one side, Falcone's gang on another side, Fish's gang on another side, and then Oswald coming up the middle with his crazies as well. What we see here is essentially the new players in town who all look like extras out of Blade Runner, I thought.
Yeah, I think it's a real artistic direction of, I think probably TJ Scott as much as Danny Cannon. It looked really punk, really kind of retro-y vibe, that just neon and makeup and spiky hair, like really good. Yeah.
So really like this. Love this idea that by the end of the discussion with everybody, he's saying essentially the exact opposite of what he said at the start of season 1. He's saying he doesn't want any more chaos, no more gang wars, no more blood running in the streets. A direct reference to his speech at the beginning of season 1, and essentially tells everybody that from now on, anybody they want to murder, anybody they want to kidnap must go through him, so he can find the source of who broke out the prisoners from Arkham Asylum, essentially. So quite good seeing the King of Gotham laying down his law. We've not seen it yet.
Yeah, I love the way he said that the ginger maniac ruined everything. Obviously, in reference to Jerome. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It's a real chip off the old Falcone block. We will have discipline and we will have unity. Yeah. And I love the fact he calls it out that, they never had it so good, as the ginger maniac has gone around putting all these, hard-working, very rich people off the streets of Gotham, not spending anything in his bars and clubs. So yeah, really, really good.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good point. We did see a little flash of this early on in the season, but it was very much it was a scene with that dialogue where he gets somebody executed in his room, where he's had somebody kneeling in front of him and pledging allegiance to Oswald, obviously. But this is the first time we've really seen him gathered by the new heads of Gotham, and he does, as you say, call it out that these are the young people, these are the new people that are taking over, and then gets interrupted rudely by Tabitha Gallivan coming in and creating another great moment within the episode. But I just thought, firstly, that point just jumped out to me, just seeing the new King of Gotham in place. Yeah,
no, I thought, and I think this leads into my main point is that King of Gotham no more, ? At least for the time being, anyway. I mean, I absolutely love the disdain with which Tabitha in particular, but even Theo had for the self-titled Oswald Cobblepot, and King of Gotham, the Penguin. I mean, they're basically, in inviting him over and disclosing their plans, and even that they were behind the Arkham breakout. There's Barbara Keene being paraded in front of him, drinking a martini. Obviously then they have the audacity to then go and kidnap Oswald's mum, Gertrude Cobblepot. Like, I absolutely loved this kind of conflict generated purposefully by the Gallavans against the big crime boss in Gotham, the King of Gotham. And they really kind of hold him in utter contempt. And I just loved that dynamic between the two. It was really good, and it really fuels Oswald Cobblepot. I mean, to me, from Robin Lord Taylor, I just got that sense that he was almost like back to square one in relation to having to now compete and go against another big boy. And in this sense, it's Theo Gallivan. He's between a rock and a hard place. He's going to implicate himself. And as sort of Gallivan is thinking and discussing his plans, he says, whilst they're going after Oswald Cobblepot, I will take the mayor position from under everyone's noses to progress his own sinister plans for revenge, really.
Yeah.
So loved it. Absolutely loved this.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, I loved the first reaction of Tabitha when Oswald comes in and tells her he's the King of Gotham. It's nice to meet the King of Gotham. No, you're the King of garbage, essentially is what she says.
Brilliant.
And Theo kind of goes, oh no, she's a bit direct. But yeah, basically you are. The whole town was built on garbage when our name was taken off it, essentially, he says. And Oswald does have a very good comeback to it. He essentially says that, a year ago, he was the umbrella boy for Fish Mooney, and then she died at his own hand. Falcone's on the run. Maroney's dead. All of them underestimated Oswald Cobblepot. He suggests you don't do the same. So he is still fighting, definitely, until it's paraded in front of them that Mrs. Cobblepot is now missing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of why I sort of suffixed it with "for the time being." I think if they underestimate the Penguin, they've lost against him. I think they probably revealed too much already. He can use that. Their only upper hand at the moment is his mum in captivity. So if his mother is rescued, if they lose her, then they've lost their bargaining chips. And it's going to be a tricky situation to come back from. And given that they've threatened Oswald with the death of his own mother, who he loves dearly.
A bit too much sometimes.
A bit too much sometimes. Remember the bath from season 1?
How could I forget that?
Yeah, absolutely. Not at that age, thank you. Maybe as a young whippersnapper, don't mind being bathed by a member of the family, but at that stage,
a bit much.
Yeah. But nonetheless, they have crossed the line here, and if they have underestimated him, he's going to let them know very soon, and very powerfully, I would have thought. Don't mess with the Penguin's mom. Absolutely.
But keeping with Galavan, and keeping with Oswald and Galavan's interaction, I suppose, the other huge bits in this episode are essentially the mission that Galavan has set for Cobblepot and his attack on the other members of the mayoral race. Difficult to say, isn't it? Mayoral.
Yeah.
So this is where all the violence comes in the episode, really, is essentially Cobblepot having to be instructed and go off and kill people. He has never actually done this before. Has he? He's killed people on his own initiative, but he's never been sent as an assassin to go and kill people. He does it for Caulfield and then uses Victor Zsasz to kill, or to attack at least, the future possible Mayor Hobbs. But there's a lot of violence in this episode again. We've talked about it before, the amount of violence that is in a show that's on between 8 and 9, and again, pushing the limits here with particularly the attack in Caulfield, where Oswald jumps on top of her and attacks her with a knife to the throat. Quite a tough scene to watch on an early evening program, isn't it?
No, absolutely. But I mean, that is also Oswald's MO so far in Gotham, is the knife. Again, it's off screen. You get the blood on the window. So, I mean, that's, to me, I think is fine. I think the thing here is that Penguin dislikes being put in this position where he is forced to do something that, quite frankly, now he is the mobster, the king of Gotham. It is not for him, unless he chooses to do so, to get his hands messy and to stick his hands into the mud. To quote a Jim Gordon from The Dark Knight. But, and that's what I loved about that. And I loved it even more that Butch, even though he doesn't know the situation with the Galavans to begin with, calls it out, and asks, why are we doing this? As they're waiting for Zsasz to go in and kill, the Councillor Hobbs. He also calls it out. He goes, we've been doing a lot of crazy stuff, today, as he's kind of got his arms around, the two Councillor Caulfield helpers and assistants, in her election bid. I loved that. I loved the fact that it just looks like this big teddy bear with his balaclava on, sort of saying, yeah, we've been going around doing a lot of crazy stuff today. I'm not too sure why. And, he doesn't understand this from being the right-hand man to, Fish Mooney, knowing how mobsters work. This makes no sense. And he asks the question. He needs to know why. And Penguin tells him, they've got my mom. And that's the whole thing that's driving this. And that is not a position that you want to have the Penguin in, or the Penguin wants to be in. So it's really good. Loved it.
Yeah. One other fun little thing that jumped out during the scene with Butch in Caulfield's office. Did you notice that he went and got the list of names and addresses and tells the two helpers, I've got your name and address, so think about your families and keep mum, is his exact phrase, which I just thought was a nice little touch, that essentially, if they do shut up and Oswald accomplishes his mission, he gets to keep his mom, which I thought was quite an interesting choice of phrase for Butch, even though he didn't know at the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. John, what's your next point?
My next case point is the introduction of Captain Nathaniel Barnes. Michael Chiklis, The Thing, Marvel DC crossover. Here we are. I really liked the entrance of Nathaniel Barnes. I thought, we have the military element here, the 10 Hut. Jim is made second in command. You've got Strike Force. He's militarizing the G.C.P.D. You should be ashamed and angry that this precinct was compromised and fellow officers, detectives, Captain Essen were murdered in cold blood. And if you feel that, you should leave. Like, he is absolutely, direct and to the point, firing a load of people for being not only detectives and officers, but also having bribery, extortion, racketeering all on their records. And I really, really liked this. I thought, you've got, again, this army guy here, and I love that connection with Jim. I think he calls himself a sad-ass army hump, and Jim comes back with, you're a fellow jarhead. I could always tell that, as the going gets difficult, as the going gets tough even, the tough get going. It's a real, call to arms, real brotherhood thing, even in assembling the recruits from the academy to this new elite unit.
Yeah.
And I really, really like that. And of course, you have the wise words of Bullock as well. Gotham doesn't have straight lines. It has twists, turns, and dead ends. Barnes is an idealist. Will he survive? Is he able to survive by being this direct, this uncompromising in his vision to root out corruption and evil? We've had it before, in Jim himself, who learned to be flexible and to manage it. Will the uncompromising nature, it would appear, of Barnes ultimately lead to his downfall or possibly his death?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because finally Jim has an ally that's doing exactly what Jim wanted to do. Essen was someone that he had to bring around to his way of thinking. And yes, she was hugely supportive of Jim, but she didn't generally go out and seek the corrupt elements of the G.C.P.D. Whereas Barnes comes straight in, smashes a chair and fires 4 guys from the G.C.P.D. immediately because he's done his homework before he arrived. He knows what he wants to do, and he's straight on Jim's side. One great thing about the conversation that Harvey and Jim have is, once again, a great callback to season 1. Harvey says exactly the same lines to Jim about Barnes that he had said to Essen when Jim arrived in GCPD. He says, this guy is the wrong person for this city, essentially, saying that Barnes is way too strict for this city. He needs to bend. He needs to, you need to bend or else you get broke. Isn't that the Essen phrase as well? They're very much having the conversation about him now that Jim's been incorporated a bit more into the GCPD and Gotham's way of thinking. It's really interesting to see that little callback as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good nod to Jim's arrival, back in season 1. It's also a slight different approach because Captain Barnes is in control. He is in charge. He obviously from somewhere has been given absolute carte blanche to do it his way.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know who it is because it's not Commissioner Loeb. It's not obviously Commissioner Essen.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Aubrey is,
indisposed
in a box, and maybe in pieces in a box at this stage. So is it just some bureaucrat who said, yeah, off you go, you're next in line kind of thing, yeah, do it your way, in that sense? Or is it from another source, a more thoughtful or, deliberate source that's telling him to do it this way?
Interesting.
Who knows?
I hadn't really considered that. Yeah, we have no mayor, we have no commissioner. They were generally the people that were holding back or putting pressure on Essen all the way throughout the first season. Who is it that's putting pressure on Barnes, or is there nobody? Has Barnes come in to take this position because he can do whatever he wants to?
Absolutely. And I'm going to nab my third point in and duck in and take it now because it links to then, his ultimate kind of we're going to take down public enemy number one, which is the Penguin. And my third point is too close to Barnes, too close to Oswald. We've got Jim Gordon is in a bind. He is in a pickle. He wants what Barnes is offering. He wanted it himself to do that, to clean up Gotham, the G.C.P.D, fight crime, fight corruption, bring the city back up on its feet. But he has, at the same time, in taking on board, I will bend a bit, or being the partner of Bullock, he has got himself into situations or into relationships like with Oswald where he's had to subvert his own principles. And whilst that's helped him to survive and be a cop, and obviously in the future to be a captain and ultimately commissioner, how will this affect this dynamic between Barnes and Jim, who he appointed as second in command? So there's a real conflict here with Jim that will increasingly and hopefully come to the surface and be made public, so that it really adds to this sort of dramatic tension. And of course, it's all called out by Oswald, in some of the very last scenes, as Jim goes to confront Oswald about his role in the murder of Councillor Caulfield and the other mayoral candidates, Theo Gallivan, who's put himself forward, and also then Councillor Hobbs.
Yeah.
And this symbiotic relationship is either going to break down and become less symbiotic and more confrontational, or it's going to persist in a way that maybe brings Jim further into the mire, I think. So it'd be really interesting to see, but I love that. I love it when Jim is exposed like this. I think it's really great for the character.
Absolutely, yeah. Really, really enjoy seeing Jim, essentially because he's going to confront Oswald. I like to see him getting kind of taken down a peg a little bit by Oswald. Thought it was a really, really good scene, and nice to really see Oswald back properly. I think we highlighted the fact that we hadn't really seen much of him up to last episode. This is the Oswald from season 1 with even more power and with even more knowledge and more to hold over Jim than he had in season 1. It's a great moment, and I'm really intrigued to see what's going to happen when Barnes, this person that seems to really respect Jim's opinion, he's the one that essentially worked together to set up the strike force. So clearly he respects Jim's opinion and respects what he's been trying to do in the GCPD. I'm really intrigued to see what happens when they find out, about the connection with Oswald. Definitely.
So Derek, what's your, next case point?
I think it's time to get on to the big one. Really, the big one for me, the big controversial moment, in the episode. The Alfred slap, as I have underlined. As Cameron Beacon Dover, Selena Kyle looks on, waiting for the arrival of Bruce Wayne to his butler. She's taken down a peg again. Another person in this episode taken down a peg, but she's stopped quite quickly by Alfred with a pretty handy slap across the face. Now he does explain it very quickly. He says, do yourself a favor, Treacle, jog on, keep away from my Bruce. And that was for Reggie. Essentially Reggie was his best friend. It seemed like he's the one that wanted to dole out the payback for what Reggie did to Bruce and to Alfred, obviously, in the season 1 episode where Alfred got stabbed. And Selena not only took that away from him being able to deal revenge on Reggie, she also killed Reggie, which is something he probably wouldn't have done. So this is I suppose that's the justification for it. Still a hugely difficult scene and very controversial for a character as beloved as Alfred is within the show and within the fandom of Gotham. A difficult scene for a lot of people to take. John, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, in my notes, I kind of got, too much question mark ultimately he hits her. I mean, it is a slap, but it's a full, hand right back with huge amount of force across the face. I kind of just thought, actually, it felt like a misstep in the writing of Alfred's character, and I thought it was an odd beat,
okay,
quite frankly, because immediately after that, when Bruce arrives, he hands over the running shoes and the jogging stuff, and Bruce goes, what do you expect me to do with this? Walk back? And he goes, no, I expect you to run back to Wayne Manor. That kind of relationship between Bruce and himself, I think he would have a similar relationship with other people of the same age as Bruce, even though she's a street kid. And yes, I understand why he's done it, and I understand that he is an army man, but I don't really want to justify it too much. I can understand it to an extent, but if he wasn't going to kill Reggie and he was going to beat on Reggie, he would have done that on the basis that he was an adult, he was an ex-army. He also tried to stab him, and if he wasn't going to kill him, then he was going to make sure that either he didn't walk again or probably was sent down to the G.C.P.D. In which case, he should have done the same with Selena, the young Selena Kyle. Or he should have just given her a real dressing down to the point whereby when you hear his words playing back in her mind while she's there sort of thinking on what he's said to her, and probably also the sting across her cheek, that it's that she remembers and not the slap. I just feel it's a slight misstep that Alfred would do this to a young Selena Kyle when he's very protective of Bruce as a young man. Even just the reason for Bruce going back to school was he was trying to protect him by smashing up the computer. He's very protective. And I know it's Bruce, and I know Selena's not Bruce, but I think he would still be protective of a child, and I don't think he would slap. I think he would tell her to clear off. I think he would certainly say, I know you killed him, I want to get it. Even if he tried to grab her, and she skips away across the wall because she skips down from the wall, then that would have made more sense. Maybe, as I say, it just seemed at odds with what I would have expected him to do, and that was as much of the shock as well as the hit or the slap.
Right, interesting. I can see the point. I would never justify hitting a child, obviously, but this is a TV show. And I do think the impact of the slap is actually more important on the TV show. Never justify, obviously, hitting a child, especially one that's not your own and you have no connection to, but the frustration of Alfred with Selena on many, many occasions, you knew he's angry and aggressive. He's from the army. He doesn't know how to deal with kids. That was set up in many, many episodes of the first season. So this is kind of a reaction that his character would have in my mind. It's the wrong reaction in the real world, obviously. But in this show, it leads to the drama of, guess what? Kids get hit, and guess what? It's not right. But this is a drama, so they do have to show that sometimes. What happens to Selena is this drives her further down that hole. While she's out in the street, she feels even more alone than she ever did. It looks like she was waiting for Bruce to kind of have a little meet up and have a chat with him, because that's another friend, another member of the world that cares about her. And basically Alfred's just taken that away from her, in the most severe way possible, by hitting her and giving her the dressing down and telling her she's worthless. So once again, we see Selena pushed and sidelined away from another connection. So I think it's justifiable in the drama of the TV show, but I think it's a really surprising moment. I definitely didn't expect the moment to happen in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say that within the context of a drama and showing violence, I'm not adverse to that at all. Whether it's towards adults and to an extent children, if it's justified within the context of the show, and even potentially, between sexes, if it's justified with regards to the story and the show. I think you can debate that as to whether it's justified in Gotham, and I'm not entirely sure how much it is to an extent. I think you could have had Alfred being really threatening, grabbing Selena by the scruff of her neck and and warning her to stay away, chasing after her, saying, if I see you next time, I'll kill you myself or something, or you're going to the locker, to the G.C.P.D. But for me, it just didn't feel right because it actually did feel at odds with Alfred's character that we've all grown to really appreciate within this show, between him and another young person. Okay, it's Bruce. I know he's his guardian.
Absolutely. They've had their moments, obviously.
But he's, I think, and maybe even just the threat of the violence would be more, I'll give you a clip round the ear or a slap around the back of the leg or something like that. But I think it was just very sort of, jarring to see that happen. And
it's interesting to see, it's interesting as an audience that we've seen the moment, but as the other characters around that are surrounding Alfred didn't see the moment. The only person that has seen it is Selena. So I'm wondering, is that going to be a reason? Will she talk about this with Bruce in some future episode? Will it be a reason for her to stay completely clear and have her own storyline completely for the rest of the season?
Exactly. Who knows?
It definitely has the drama, and it is definitely something that was a huge talking point after the episode aired. And it is a surprising moment. Don't get me wrong. Seeing any child being hit is a very difficult moment on a TV show, regardless, whether in real life or in a TV show. Sorry. So yeah, and absolutely seeing one of our favorite characters being the one to perform it is also difficult to see as well. So but I do think the fact that it was brought back later on and was dealt with quite well handled, definitely when she's sitting in the street, hearing the voice of Alfred, speaking to her, as well, it was really interesting too. And I'm wondering how much that will play out as the rest of the season goes on.
No, exactly.
But off from the very controversial point, John, what's your next point?
I also had that point as one of my 5, but my next point is that Ed Nigma gets his woman.
Yes, let's get on to some fun
He
stuff.
has his date with Christine Kringle. I absolutely think Corey Michael Smith doing Ed Nigma and the Riddler is, quite frankly, really fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I loved him talking to the skeleton in the morgue.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. I love the fact that his forensic science background means that in cooking he's using the same kind of principles to make the creme brulee and the little globules of sweetness or whatever that's going on top.
Brilliant. He'd be good on MasterChef, wouldn't he?
He really would. I absolutely love that. And again, I just thought the first date was brilliantly handled. I loved the slip of the tongue where he says he's dead, and I loved then him talking to Christine Kringle about his other self who keeps him in check because he's such a klutz, and she kind of believes that, and I think I could believe that as well.
Yeah.
And I really, really liked that, and I loved the fact that she says there's a voice telling me that we can get back to that point before you ruined it as well. It's awkward, it's cute. I love the kiss. I love the little clink of the spectacles as they go in for this kiss. It's really great. And finally, Ed Nigma has got his date. I think in addition to Corey Michael Smith and Chelsea Spack's performance and dynamic interaction in this scene, there were a few other things I think that really helped this scene along. It was the cool industrial apartment that
awesome.
Ed Nigma's got. I was like, I just love that. I want it.
Yeah.
And that is my dream penthouse. Maybe not quite as dark and green as that, but nonetheless.
The greens and reds are awesome.
I loved it. It was really, really cool.
You could definitely tell this is an episode done by TJ Scott. He
Exactly.
really adds some stuff to this episode.
Big time. He's got a real eye for these kind of visuals. It's really, really good.
Not, of course, to diminish the people who created the sets and all the people who've done work on it for months before he came in and directed the episode. But it seems like his episode has always got these really individual and unique angles or style that's going on.
But I think that's it. It's the way it's shot in that space. And I loved that. I also loved just, again, how they're doing the Riddler's voice, that kind of echoiness, that shouty sort of fade off echo that they're doing to highlight when the Riddler is speaking to Enigma. It feels, even though you've got, you know, the additional performance of Corey Michael Smith as the Riddler there and with Enigma, it just feels like it's in his head because of that kind of echo.
Yeah.
And it just feels like the Riddler. It reminds me of the Arkham computer games as well, as to how the Riddler speaks and those, and it's really, really cool. And that I think is really good as well.
Definitely.
And I think, you know, just quickly coming back to TJ Scott, you know, another visual that was really striking. Not only did we have Victor Zsasz back, played by Anthony Corrigan, who's brilliant, absolutely elevates anything and any scene that he's in. Love his performance as Victor Zsasz.
He even elevated Arrow when he was on that.
No, exactly, he really did. But it was his escape from the new Strike Force when he shoots the fire hydrant and just that water across the street and how he disappears into it. Fantastic visual, you know.
What an escape! Yeah, it was
brilliant. But just the visual, like this is a TV show. I was like, wow, that's cool, really cool.
Yeah, it was deadly, wasn't it?
Top notch.
Yeah, really good job. Really love TJ Scott's episodes. Some of the other episodes are obviously as good, but you can really tell he's got a certain style about him when he comes on set, and you can see why they ask him back so often to do episodes of Gotham and episodes of other really big visual TV shows as well. Really enjoyable. Did you notice something about Ed's apartment and where it was located? We did talk about this street in season 1. Ed's apartment is on Grundy Street, so another little reference to Solomon Grundy again.
It is, and it is Chez Moi.
Yes, yeah, I like that little touch where Kristen thinks she's going out to a lovely French restaurant called Chez Moi, and it turns out to be my house in French, obviously. As any of us who've had a basic French language course would probably have been able to tell you, because about all I remember from my French language courses.
Oui, bonsoir.
All right. For me, my next point is actually back to the Strike Force themselves, because we do need to talk about them. It seems like this, given the name of the episode and given the fact that they've got a big mission at the end of the episode, I wanted to quickly talk about the Strike Force themselves. I love this little setup. I wish it was given a little bit more time in the episode, because this is something that you would probably get in every big movie like The Expendables or, you know, Strike Force Team. You know, this is what they sound like. You're given some very basic criteria of the four members of the Strike Force. You're given there a very small interview with them, where they're asked a couple of questions about who they are and why they belong as members of the Strike Force. So we have Martinez, Garrett, Hickney, and Jose, are the 4 members of the Strike Force. Jose is the woman who's in the ring at the beginning, and they find out that she waits for the right moment to attack, and then she unleashes hell on her opponent. Essentially, we've got Martinez, who says that he is working his way through the academy, not taking the sports scholarship that he so richly deserved because people from his neighborhood don't get a sports scholarship. There's Garrett, who is a heavily qualified person, but wants to go through the academy because his father was victimized in Gotham and doesn't want to see it happen to anybody else. And then there's Hickney, who is the best shot in Gotham because he spent all of his time down the shooting range, where his mom used to work. So really interesting little touches of characters. They've all got a different reason for being there, and they've all have a different history. I think in another episode, with probably less going on with the members of our regular cast in Gotham, we may have gotten a bit more expansion on these guys, but hopefully in the next episode, when we see it in 2016, we'll probably get a bit more about each of these characters.
No, absolutely. I loved as well the wise words of Bullock that he gives to them after their first encounter with Victor Zsasz, where I think it's Jose gets shot. And obviously she's got a Kevlar on, but he says, and they're all kind of like, you know, it's the first person who's kind of been taken down, injured, kind of, you know, winded, but has survived and lived to tell another tale. And Bullock says, you know, don't laugh at being shot. The next one essentially could be through your eye. You know, wise words from Bullock, straight to the point. Really like that kind of little interaction with, you know, the old seahorse, so to speak. I love that interaction with the old sea dog kind of thing, with, Bullock. I thought it was really, really good.
So not the sea.
Not the seahorse. He changed his sex.
I think it was,
otherwise,
was it a mix of warhorse and sea dog?
I think it may have been. Okay. Yeah. So, but I loved that. I think the other thing that I found quite interesting was, how Barnes justifies bringing these new recruits fresh out of the academy, because they're unbought. There's been no one there with, I don't know, a briefcase of money, no one there to put them on their payroll to get what they want. He says they're fresh. They're still with the faith, in the system. They have faith. And that is what we want to, have, and we want to retain and capture that. And actually, for me, with this assembly of the strike force, this unit Alpha, I thought there was very much hints of that MCU element where, it's a band of people that you can trust, that each other has one another's back, that they aren't in the pockets of a mobster, of another criminal, and they have the same ideals as you. And I mean, I suppose it just, again, it brought me back to, well, where's the MCU? It's kind of the same ethos to an extent, maybe a bit more SWAT team like. So it's nice in that sense, but it would be good if there was some interaction there. I know I'm harping on about this always, but,
I did like the touch for the strike force, though, that they report directly to Jim, and Jim reports directly to Captain Barnes now. So this is the ultimate, as you said earlier on, the militarization of the police force, which is really interesting given what's been going on in the US this year with the militarization question over the police force, with incidents like Ferguson in the US earlier on this year, and the suggestion that the police need greater and greater access to quite high grade weaponry, to army level weaponry on the streets of the US. So I think that the writers are definitely making a commentary about that kind of militarization of the police force and what it would take when you do have a city as corrupt and as destroyed as Gotham. Would that be enough to push you over the edge to allow the police to have weapons that an army would have in your local town, essentially? So, interesting idea. I'm sure we'll see that play out more when we see episode 5 next year, when it returns to the UK and Ireland. So, John, what's your final point in this episode?
My final point is a quick two-parter. One is we have the introduction of Silver St. Cloud, the ward of the Gallivan twins, or siblings. And it's also, to what extent is Theo Gallivan going to use her to influence, to, corrupt the young Bruce Wayne? They're going to go to the same preparatory school. There's obviously, some designs on Bruce's family, the Wayne family. Theo kind of gets his foot in the door emotionally with Bruce by talking about the murder of his parents. Of the fact that the police, and the G.C.P.D haven't, actually been able to, solve the case yet, despite them being two really prominent members of society. So, this is real manipulative stuff from Theo Gallivan towards the younger Bruce Wayne.
Absolutely, and definitely, as we can see with pretty much every other character that Gallivan meets up with, he knows everything about Bruce. He's done his homework.
Yeah. Big time. And I think, again, the other part about that scene, which I really enjoyed, again, was just the location, that restaurant, or that location underneath, the arches of one of the bridges there coming off, presumably Manhattan Island. Absolutely great setting. Again, brilliant use and framing by TJ Scott. And again, to be honest, for me, it really just also reconnected me with the GCPD precinct as well. Nathaniel Barnes talks about it being 100 years old, having seen a lot of stuff go on in it. Loads of perps that have been arrested in the precinct and so on. I absolutely just it connected me back to the sets and the locations were a real big feature of this episode for me. Along with, as we've already mentioned, the industrial, cool looking apartment of Ed Nigma's.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about Silver Sensed Cloud. That was my final point. The introduction of Silver. Wow, Bruce is taken by her so quickly. I think Theo, if she's the ward or if she's a niece or if she's a hired, attractive young girl, which she could possibly be, he's picked the right person for Bruce. He gets distracted almost instantly by the girl dancing in the fountain outside. Nice little reference there to, I think, the Dark Knight trilogy with the two models that were dancing in the fountain of the restaurant. Do you remember that in the Dark Knight?
Yes.
With Christian Bale's Batman, or Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne, in fact. A nice little touch there, I thought, from TJ Scott or from Danny Cannon, to reference that. But yeah, Silver really has taken a fancy to Bruce, or takes Bruce's fancy very quickly. A nice little touch that they're both in the same school together, and Bruce is back at Andrew's Prep. So, that's quite cool to see him back there. Hopefully we'll get to see, as we mentioned before, some of the other characters we saw in that preparatory school last year.
Yeah. And they both have second homes in Geneva.
Yes. Yeah. So definitely a lot of connections there between the two. Interesting to see what the plan is with Silver, because there definitely is one. She's not just being presented as a possible love interest for Bruce. There's definitely some plan for Galavan.
Damn you rich kids with your second homes in the Alps.
That would be pretty awesome. If they're able to buy them, usually they're only kept available for people from the Alps, aren't they?
Yeah, that is very true. Certainly was the case in Zermatt, just by the Matterhorn.
Fabulous city. On that note, I think that's it for our 5 points about this episode. Any particular notes from this episode, John, that stood out, or have we covered everything?
Yeah, no, I've just got one quick note. It's just a little Bullockism there, a sort of 1966 Batman Bullockism, where the Strike Force are going in to take down Victor Zaz, as they're called out to save and protect Councillor Hobbs, and just he turns to Jim and goes, "Okay, so they move in formation well," or something to that effect. I just love the dry wit and snark of Harvey Bullock here. Again, these new kids on the block, okay, I'll give it to them that they know how to hold formation kind of thing. I love it.
Yeah, it's very much, it's because Jim gives them some kind of army directions, and Bullock kind of goes, yeah, you go do that. And then they do it perfectly, and makes that kind of a nice little moment.
It's a really good little touch, the old school, new school kind of thing. Really, really liked it.
Yeah. Love the closing of this episode, and mentioned it in my points, but I love that it's got a really gothic looking Oswald Cobblepot, who's becoming more and more creepy looking as the season's been going on, sitting in front of a huge gothic fireplace, screaming into the fire because Butch hasn't been able to find his mom. A nice, excellent moment for the end of the episode, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, John, overall, what do you think of the episode?
I am going to give this 3.5 Ginger Maniacs out of 5. I thought...
he survives into another episode.
I know. The spirit of Jerome lives on through Oswald Cobblepot's use of the term Ginger Maniac. And that's the thing. He has had ramifications in the city of Gotham. Little does everyone else know that he was merely a puppet for Theo Galavan, but now Penguin is also aware of this as well. Yeah. I really liked this development of Theo Galavan's story. I loved the introduction of Captain Barnes. I loved the army connections between him and Jim Gordon. I thought that was really good as well. Obviously, the Strike Force. I thought locations and sets here were amazing. Some of the shots that TJ Scott does are really cool. I thought, as well, the fact that Ed gets his woman in Christine Kringle is a really nice payoff. Yes. I love that it was a slow burn and that we've got that payoff. And I think the tension, the animosity, the disdain between, and what's brewing between the King of Gotham, Oswald, and the Galavans, especially with poor Gertrude Kappelport kidnapped, is really, really good. For me, personally, the Alfred hit of Selina was a slight misstep in terms of the writing, for me, for that character. But that's just my opinion. Other people may think that it was okay and it was justified, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think this was a nice little episode. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Strike Force develops over the next few episodes as well. Obviously, it's going to be much later on, but for me, this was a solid episode of Gotham. Really liked it. And so that's why I give it 3.5 Ginger Maniacs out of 5.
I'm probably not as sold as much on this particular episode. I thought it was a big setup episode. It struck me, I think, after I'd watched it, as to why it wasn't shown at New York Comic Con. This is definitely not the episode that you show to people to encourage them to watch the show. It's something that you show to people who already watch to get them prepared for next week's episode, is the way I feel. It's kind of a 3 out of 5 for me. If I'm to give it a rating. There's a lot going on, but it's a lot of setup for things that are going to happen in the future, and a lot of dealing with characters that we've been watching for over a season and a bit now, over almost 30 episodes really, at this stage. So there's some great stuff that happens to the characters that we love, and some introductions to characters that hopefully we're going to like in future. Great to see a new ally for Jim. Great to see the Strike Force. That's quite an interesting idea. Again, brings up some interesting questions for the future of the show and the future of the team in the G.C.P.D. But an overall enjoyable episode, not a bad one. Just one that's setting up something that we won't see for about 3 months now, unfortunately.
No, it really is so brutally, sad. There's such a gap between the air date in the US and now in Ireland and the UK, especially given that last year it was only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense. And I mean, just so that I can vent it, I suppose, and say it's that every time Channel 5 now tweet about something or put something up on Facebook in relation to the Gotham on 5 handle that they use, the comments that they get back are all just the same. Why was it scheduled for the start of 2016, of which we still don't have a start date? You know, that people are going to be downloading this. I mean, this is not the way to combat, I suppose, downloading of episodes, ultimately.
Yep.
But I don't know. It's just really strange because it's not doing them any favors, I don't think. At least not on the comments section on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's many reasons why a channel won't show a show immediately after. We're really lucky with TV shows like The Walking Dead, which airs the following night over here. Really lucky with things like Game of Thrones, which air pretty much the same time as they do in the US, all to combat piracy and all because of the money spent on those shows. We're lucky on the DC side that things like Arrow and Flash and Supergirl are all aired within the same week of them airing in the US. That's fantastic. It's just not done all the time, unfortunately, and Gotham has fallen victim to that this year, and we're going to be quite far behind. But on the positive side, we do have some news and feedback that we're going to play out from our listeners for the rest of the show. So there's tons of stuff that came out over the last couple of weeks about new casting, and we got some feedback from our listeners on that. So it's into feedback.
Fascinating. Point well made, I think.
So our first piece of feedback is on this episode 4 of Gotham, from Natalie. Natalie made some great points in her email. One of the first points she has for us is about Theo Galavan. She says, in this episode, Theo Galavan is a chess master who's playing with fire. His multi-dimensional plan has too many moving parts that need to be aligned properly. First, he frees some Arkham inmates to sow chaos, but they could have easily turned on him. Now he's manipulated the Penguin into doing his bidding by kidnapping Oswald's own sainted mother. That's asking for major retribution, which I hope he gets from the Penguin himself. All this is to manipulate Gotham into electing him as mayor. No matter how he frames everything, so many potential mayoral candidates dropping from the race is going to make him the last man standing look quite suspicious. Perhaps not as the mastermind, but certainly in the pocket of a mastermind. Then there's that construction project. It would be a monument to ethics violations if it ever gets completed. There must be a few potential historic buildings under its footprint. He can't charm or buy off or kill all of the activists and advocates for the neighborhood without raising more suspicions.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely, Galavan is treading a thin line with the Penguin. As soon as one of those pieces fails to move, as you say, as the chess master, or it topples over, Oswald knows he was behind Arkham, and was asked to do his bidding for the sake of protecting his own mum. So Galavan, maybe unwittingly, and maybe he has, as we were talking about, has underestimated the Penguin, and you do that at your peril, as Oswald says. Definitely, I think that the fact that Hobbs survived the attack by Zaz certainly means that Galavan as a mayoral candidate will look less suspicious. He can't be the only person to run for the position, otherwise that would look certainly suspicious. So I reckon he's savvy with that. And then for me, in terms of the construction project, I just kind of thought, well, this is Galavan Towers versus Wayne Towers in relation to the skyline. That's what it felt like to me.
And it definitely looked like something out of Joel Schumacher's Batman. The particular model that they had with the neon building right in the middle of the model. But
I think this also harked back to then the meeting between Maroney and Falcone with regards to Indian Heights and the Arkham project. Why they want that particular area of Arkham. It felt a bit like in that vein to me. So it'll be interesting now to see really how this kind of takes shape, really, definitely.
Yeah. Natalie also speaks about Captain Barnes, says he made a great entrance. He certainly means business. We've gone from a war within the Gotham mob to a war on the mob. Gotham does its version of the Untouchables, complete with declaring Penguin public enemy number one, with the added modernization of making Unit Alpha part SWAT or tactical team. One of the questions hanging over the show when it began last year was how would a rookie Detective Gordon rise to his destiny as commissioner? We now have a solid part of that answer. Even moderate success with a short-lived strike force is a resume or CV builder. Best case, Barnes himself rises to commissioner, taking Gordon as a trusted second.
I definitely like that theory. Absolutely. I really hope that it's not short-lived with regards to the strike force, but I think it will be, just by the sort of, as you say, the very tactical team nature of it. It's kind of having to write episodes that are based around a SWAT element or tactical team. It might start to get them through a particular vein of storyline in order to shape that type of story. I mean, I would love to see that kind of merge with the MCU and ultimately be consumed by the MCU. That idea of a close-knit, tight team that reports to one man, which is what the MCU, and hopefully we will see then the return of the MCU. I like that idea, that maybe Gordon gets put in charge of that team, or some version of it.
Absolutely, much like in the comic books. Yeah, it would be great to see.
It'd be really good.
Be great to see them return, definitely. Yeah. And finally, Natalie says, hands down, my favorite part was Alfred's quip to Bruce. No, Master Bruce, I expect you to run. As a classic Bond fan, I loved it. Perfectly fit the pattern of Goldfinger's original line. Best quote of the season so far. What I want to know is where between the writer's room, the table reads, and the actual shooting of the scene did they figure out that Bruce's bewilderment walked him straight into that quip? And how much did they debate whether or not to keep it in? I can actually see that as a gag Sean and David came up with at the table read. I would have liked to see in the end of the training run with Bruce struggling home for a late supper, just so we could contrast it later with a stronger, quicker Bruce. Yeah, really good scene. Definitely really enjoyed that.
I actually, now you say it, it does sound like the classic Goldfinger original line in terms of how it pitter-patters, and certainly with Spectre just out here this Monday whilst we're recording this. It's perfect timing, really, to have that kind of classic Bond delivery to that line. No, yeah. I absolutely thought that was a great quip, and I think for me, on the basis of the podcast we've just done, to me that is Alfred, that type of line. So for me, it was great to have that in there, given maybe some of his more out of character or more extreme moments in this episode.
Yeah, I think the slap was probably still echoing in our ears as the line came up.
It was a bit, but having said that, I would have loved to have seen Bruce struggling home as well, because just the look on his face was perfect. Again, really good chemistry between these two. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, and just a point of clarity, Natalie did ask, was this episode screened at New York Comic Con? I think we mentioned earlier on the episode, just to clarify, they didn't actually screen an episode at New York Comic Con. This was broadcast the night after New York Comic Con finished, so that's why we were able to see it. But unfortunately, unlike last year, we didn't get to see this episode with an audience. It's always a great experience at New York Comic Con to see an episode with an audience, definitely.
Yeah, big time. And as well, Natalie does say what a great character growth moment in this week's episode for Ed Nigma and the boost in his confidence. Absolutely, completely agree. The date, chez moi, Miss Kringle, the kiss. Just absolutely brilliant, coupled, as Natalie points out, to the Freudian slip about I'm glad he's dead in relation to her former boyfriend. Really good dynamic between those two actors. Loved the setting, loved every part of that, and a real good payoff. It just shows you long story arc, long character development and growth, and it almost makes it more wonderful to see it happen for those very reasons.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your feedback, Natalie, and thank you so much for your feedback so far this season. Hope you'll join us again in 2016 when we return with episode 5.
It sounds so awful. It's like saying goodbye to a friend for a few months. Again, Natalie, thank you so much for the great feedback that you've come back to us with. It's a pleasure to read it out, along with the other contributions that we've got from now moving into some feedback we got on Facebook in relation to some of the news that we had reported on this week for new characters showing up in the form of Mr. Freeze, or is that Mr. Freesh or Freish?
Yes.
Or is he doctor? Is he a doctor? I always get this confused.
Don't you? Yeah, no, it's definitely Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, but he will be played by the House of Cards, Nathan Darrow, Kevin Spacey's bodyguard from way back in season 1, I think he was appointed. So he kind of looks to me like Mr. Freeze, particularly from the animated version. I can't wait to see him with a shade of glacial blue.
yeah, that's it's a really interesting bit of casting. I really enjoyed Nathan Darrow in House of Cards, one of my favorite shows. I know we've definitely watched quite a few episodes of that. Really good idea to bring these characters in. Along with his casting, we've also had some casting for Nora Freeze, Kristen Hagar, who made a big splash apparently in the US version of the fantastic TV show Being Human. Will be coming on board to play Nora Freeze.
Or is that Nora Fries? Or is that Nora Freezes?
Possibly. We'll probably see some interesting pronunciations like Dollmaker in season 1.
Dollmaker.
Yeah.
Or Dollmaker.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm silly moment now.
In response to this casting, Ben Rush says, I wonder if they'll stick to the classic origin or the new 52 version, which is a lot darker. I do remember an origin story for Mr. Freeze, which was quite a dark origin story. The main one I think most of us know is the basic story of essentially Mr. Freeze is looking for a cure for an illness that his wife has developed. I think that's the basics, without spoiling anything that could be coming up later on in the season. That's the basics of the story that we know. There have been some very dark versions of that story, and the illness that she has and the reasoning behind why Mr. Freeze goes after, this cure for his wife. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't read the comic books, but there are some fantastic versions out there. The Batman animated series did a movie about Mr. Freeze and his origin story. I definitely recommend you seek that one out if you haven't, if you're not aware of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Also in response to this news, Daniel Butcher responded with Boom, This is usually Daniel's indication that he really enjoys the news story or the piece of information that's out there. Thanks for that, Daniel, and thanks for that, Ben, as well. Another bit of casting that we haven't spoken about for this week is that B.D. Wong has been cast in the role of Hugo Strange, a character we've kind of known has been coming to Gotham since the beginning of season 1 and has finally been cast. B.D. Wong was in Jurassic Park and was the only returning cast member who came back for a very short moment, or a very small moment for Jurassic World, but a big character nonetheless, and a big actor nonetheless, and interesting to see him.
And in Jurassic World, he did cause trouble and strife with his crossbreeding.
Quite a bit. We expect to see him back in Jurassic World 2, whatever that's going to be called. Jurassic Universe, maybe?
Yeah, Jurassic greatness, I think.
Yeah.
I love Jurassic World. Silly, perfect, fantastic. More summer blockbusters should be like that.
Absolutely. And Dylan Exner perfectly sums it up with Hugo Strange's mutant dinos.
Exactly.
That's his response to B.D. Wong's casting. Thanks again for your feedback. As always, make sure you do follow us on Facebook at Gotham TV Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Gotham TV Podcast. We're generally on there quite a lot. It's getting very spoilery. The further we get away from the coverage of the episodes that we saw in New York. So probably trying not to be spoiled a huge amount. So if you do want to send us feedback about episodes, please make sure you send them to feedback@gothamtvpodcast.com. We'll collect them over the next couple of weeks. It's only 9 weeks to next year, so it'll be okay. We'll collect them over the next couple of weeks and we'll share them on our future episodes of Gotham Season 2.
Exactly. And in the meantime, join us for Marvel's Jessica Jones on Netflix from the 20th of November, where we will be podcasting all about a private investigator and her investigations across the city of New York and her own battle with her own inner demons.
Absolutely. If you enjoy dark TV shows, and Gotham's had its dark moments, I definitely recommend you go and check that out. A really strong female character and a really good show.
Yep. And if you like Doctor Who, then there is, of course, David Tennant as a Mr. Kilgrave. And all we can say, based on what we saw at New York Comic Con, is that for a very small amount of screen time, and I mean minuscule, if barely on screen physically, he packs a huge punch and impression on that first episode. So we can't wait to cover these 13 episodes, but please join us at defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes for all Jessica Jones kicking off from the 20th of November. And of course, you can tweet with us at DefendersCast on Twitter.
Yeah, tons of links there for you.
Loads of links to remember.
Absolutely.
Remember to jot them down with a bit of pen and paper.
They'll all be in the show notes. Don't worry. But as always, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really good to talk to the listeners, to talk about our enjoyment of the episodes so far. Disappointed that we won't be seeing any more for the next couple of months, but it's not that long. We'll get together again very soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in 2016. Bye.
Thanks for being a Butch supporter. Butch loves you, baby.
And then this hit me, and I've forgotten what happens to hit me.
I don't know. Shooting range?